I welcomed my daughter's husband into my home with open arms and trusted him with my life. I thought I was gaining a son. Instead, I invited a monster across my threshold. He brutally shattered my arm to force my signature and steal the only home I have left. But he made one fatal mistake. He thought I was just a fragile old widow. He forgot who I really am. I am Clara, and I am 68 years old. For 30 years, I worked as a high school principal in a tough district. I spent my career disciplining bullies, seeing right through lies, and building a quiet, comfortable life with my late husband, Arthur. We bought our 4-bedroom colonial house 40 years ago. It was our sanctuary. When Arthur passed away 5 years ago from a sudden stroke, my world shrank to the size of those 4 walls. I poured all my remaining love and trust into my only daughter, Chloe, and the man she married, Travis. I treated Travis like my own flesh and blood. I cooked his favorite pot roast on Sundays. I loaned them money for their cars. I believed he was the strong, dependable protector my daughter deserved. Then came the afternoon that tore my reality to shreds. The pain was a blinding white flash that swallowed the entire room. I was lying on the cold hardwood floor of my kitchen, gasping for air that simply refused to fill my lungs. My right arm was bent back at an unnatural, horrifying angle. The sound of the bone snapping was still echoing in my ears, a sickening crack that vibrated through my teeth and settled deep in my chest. I tried to push myself up, but the agony pinned me to the floor. The world spun in dizzying circles. I could taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. Through my blurred vision and the tears streaming down my face, I could see his shoes. Polished brown leather loafers. I looked up, fighting through the wave of nausea. Standing over me was Travis, the man who called me Mom just hours ago. His face was entirely devoid of panic, guilt, or regret. Instead, it was twisted into a cold, calculating sneer. In his left hand, he held a thick stack of papers. It was a pre-filled quitclaim deed for my house. On the top corner of the crisp white page, there was a single bright drop of my own blood. I had hit the sharp edge of the granite island when he forcefully shoved me, slicing my cheek, before my full weight crushed my arm against the hardwood floor. I waited for him to reach down and help me. I waited for the frantic apology, for the horrified realization of what he had just done to his wife's mother. But the apology never came. Travis did not panic. He did not drop the papers. He did not ask if I was all right. He calmly reached into the pocket of his tailored suit, pulled out his phone, and dialed 911. He let it ring, but before the emergency operator could answer the call, he crouched down beside me. His face was inches from mine. I could smell the sharp peppermint on his breath, mixed with the expensive designer cologne I had bought him for his birthday. The operator's voice crackled loudly from the phone speaker, asking what the emergency was. Travis put his large hand firmly over the microphone. He leaned in, his eyes flat and dead like a shark looking at prey, and whispered his ultimatum. "You are going to tell the paramedics you had a dizzy spell and took a bad fall, Clara. Dementia is a tragic thing. You are losing your balance. You are getting confused." I sobbed, clutching my shattered arm against my chest, unable to comprehend the pure evil radiating from him. I tried to speak, to call out for help, but he pressed a heavy finger hard against my uninjured shoulder, pinning me firmly against the floorboards. "If you say anything else," he hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous, terrifying pitch, "I will tell the police you attacked Chloe. I will tell them you went into a violent, senile rage, and I had to physically restrain you to protect my pregnant wife. I will have you locked in a state psychiatric ward before the sun goes down today. And I will make sure you never, ever see your granddaughter Emma again. Do you understand me?" The operator's voice grew louder on the phone, demanding a response. Travis held my gaze. The threat was absolute and perfectly calculated. I knew Chloe. She was emotionally fragile, blindly devoted to him, and heavily pregnant with their second child. Travis had spent the last 6 months subtly planting the idea among our friends and family that I was becoming forgetful. He would hide my keys and then help me find them. He would claim I repeated stories. Now, lying broken on the floor, I understood why. He had been meticulously laying the groundwork for this exact moment. He had built a flawless trap, and I had walked right into it. I looked at the quitclaim deed still gripped tightly in his hand. He wanted my house. He wanted to strip me of the home Arthur and I had built with decades of hard work, and he was perfectly willing to destroy my physical body and my mental reputation to get it. I looked into his cold eyes and gave a sharp, agonizing nod. A satisfied smirk touched the corner of his lips. He lifted his finger from the phone's microphone, and instantly his voice transformed. He sounded frantic, terrified, the absolute picture of a devoted, panicking son-in-law. "Please, you have to send an ambulance right away," he cried into the phone, his voice shaking with fake tears. "It is my mother-in-law. She had a terrible fall. I think she broke her arm. She is so confused and disoriented. Please hurry." I lay on the floor, breathing in short, shallow gasps. The physical pain in my arm was excruciating, a relentless, burning fire that radiated up to my neck. But it was absolutely nothing compared to the agony of the betrayal. Travis stood up, adjusting his tie, playing the role of the panicked family member to perfection. He thought he had broken me. He thought the threat of losing my beloved granddaughter Emma would force me into permanent submission. He thought I was just a frail, wealthy widow waiting to be swindled out of her life savings. As the distant wail of sirens began to cut through the quiet suburban neighborhood, I closed my eyes. I realized the man I had welcomed into my family was a monster. But as the blinding pain washed over me, another thought pierced the darkness in my mind. Travis had made a severe miscalculation. I was not a fragile victim. I was a principal who had stared down the worst kinds of predators and liars for 30 years. The war had just begun. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room glared down at me like interrogators. My right arm throbbed with a sickening heat, encased in temporary splints, while a nurse wiped the dried blood from the cut on my cheek. I could hear the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor next to my bed, a steady soundtrack to the absolute chaos inside my mind. My breathing was shallow. Every inhalation sent a shockwave of pain through my shattered bone, a constant reminder of the sheer brutality I had just survived in my own kitchen. Then the heavy double doors swung open and the performance began. Travis rushed into the room, his arm wrapped protectively around my daughter Chloe. Chloe was weeping uncontrollably, her hands resting on her swollen, pregnant belly. Travis looked like the perfect picture of a devastated, doting son-in-law. His tie was slightly loosened, his hair perfectly tousled to suggest panic. He guided Chloe to my bedside and immediately began speaking to the attending physician in that smooth, persuasive tone he used to charm his wealthy investment clients. "Doctor, please tell me she's going to be all right," Travis said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "I found her on the kitchen floor. She's been so confused lately, having these terrible dizzy spells. We have been begging her to let us help her more around the house, but she is so proudly independent. She must have lost her balance and taken a terrible tumble." I watched him lie with a chilling effortlessness. He did not stutter. He did not look away. He painted the picture of a tragic, declining old woman with masterful strokes. Chloe sobbed harder, burying her face in Travis's chest. "Oh, Mom," she cried out. "Travis told me how he found you. He was so terrified. Thank God he stopped by to check on you." The attending physician, a young man with kind eyes, turned to me with a clipboard in his hands. "Mrs. Clara," he said gently, "you have a severe compound fracture in your right arm and a laceration on your cheek. Can you tell me exactly what happened in the kitchen?" The room fell dead silent. Travis stood behind the doctor, his hands resting on my daughter's shoulders. His knuckles were white. His eyes locked onto mine, cold and dead, transmitting the threat he had whispered to me on the hardwood floor just an hour ago. If I told the truth, if I said he violently shoved me against the granite island to force me to sign away my home, he would trigger his backup plan. He would tell them I attacked my pregnant daughter. He would lock me in a psychiatric ward. He would take my granddaughter Emma away forever. For 30 years as a high school principal, I evaluated lies. I sat across desks from manipulative bullies and arrogant teenagers, dissecting their stories and finding the truth. I knew how to calculate odds. I lay there in that hospital bed and ran the brutal mathematics of my current situation. It was my word, the word of a 68-year-old widow against a charismatic, wealthy-seeming young professional. I had absolutely no proof. I had no security cameras in my kitchen. The deed he wanted me to sign was neatly tucked away in his tailored suit jacket. If I screamed the truth right now, Chloe would not believe me. She was deeply under his spell, relying on him entirely. I would be painted as a paranoid, hysterical old woman suffering from early-onset dementia. If I accused him now, I would lose everything. I would lose my daughter. I would lose my granddaughter. I would be completely isolated, and Travis would win. To defeat a predator, you must first convince them that you are prey. I swallowed my pride, a lump so bitter it nearly choked me. I deliberately made my good hand tremble. I lowered my gaze to my lap, forcing a tear to spill over my cheek. "I am so sorry, Chloe," I whispered, making my voice sound small and fragile. Travis is right. I got so dizzy. The room just started spinning. I tried to catch myself on the counter, but I missed. I took a terrible fall. Chloe exhaled a massive breath of relief and rushed forward to kiss my forehead. "It is okay, Mom. We are just so glad you are alive." The doctor nodded sympathetically, writing down my false confession on his medical chart. "It happens quite often, Mrs. Clara. We will get you patched up, but you are going to need significant help at home during your recovery." Over Chloe's shoulder, I saw Travis relax his grip. The tension left his shoulders. He looked down at me, and for a fraction of a second the mask slipped. He gave me a microscopic, chilling smirk. It was a smile of pure victory. He truly believed he had broken the fierce, independent principle. He believed I had surrendered. He had no idea I was simply retreating to gather my strength. The nurses came in shortly after to set the bone. The procedure was agonizing. Every twist of my arm sent shooting stars of pain behind my eyes, but I refused to cry out. I focused my mind on my late husband, Arthur. Arthur had been a quiet man, but a fiercely protective one. He always told me that a calm mind was the greatest weapon a person could possess. As the plaster hardened around my arm, creating a heavy, suffocating weight, I promised Arthur's memory that I would not let this criminal destroy the family we built. Travis hovered by the door the entire time, playing his part flawlessly. He fetched water for Chloe, asked the nurses polite questions about my recovery timeline, and offered to handle all the hospital billing. The medical staff fawned over him, whispering to Chloe about how lucky she was to have such a supportive husband. It made my stomach churn violently. The illusion he projected was impenetrable to the untrained eye. But I was not untrained. I saw the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, looking for any sign that my compliance was fading. He did not leave me alone with a medical professional for a single second. He was guarding his captive. When the discharge papers were finally printed, Travis stepped forward with that same sickening smile, announcing that they would be taking me home immediately. The real nightmare began the moment my front door closed behind us. Travis did not just drop me off. He announced to Chloe that given my declining state, it was their duty as a family to move into my house to provide round-the-clock care. Chloe, exhausted from the hospital visit and heavy with pregnancy, agreed instantly, praising his dedication. She told me how blessed we were to have a man willing to put his life on hold for my well-being. It took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to scream the truth at her right then and there. Within hours, the disrespect began. I was confined to the guest bedroom on the first floor because I could no longer safely navigate the stairs with my heavy cast. From that room I listened as Travis began systematically dismantling my life. His first target was Arthur's study. Arthur had loved that room. It was filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, his leather reading chair, and his collection of antique pipes. It was a sacred space in our home, untouched since the day he passed. I heard the heavy thud of cardboard boxes hitting the floor. I managed to shuffle down the hallway, dragging my aching body, only to find Travis carelessly tossing Arthur's first edition books and pipe collection into black garbage bags. He was humming a cheerful tune while he erased my husband's legacy. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling with genuine outrage. "Those belong to Arthur. You have no right to touch them." Travis did not even pause. He tossed another armful of books into the bag. Chloe walked into the hallway carrying a stack of fresh towels. "Mom, please do not get upset," she said gently, completely missing the cruelty of the moment. "Travis needs a quiet place to work from home so he can be here to keep an eye on you. He is setting up his home office. We are just putting Dad's things in the garage for now. They belong on those shelves." "Chloe," I pleaded, looking to my daughter for support. But Chloe just sighed, giving Travis a look of profound gratitude. "Mom, Travis is making a huge sacrifice, moving his whole setup here to care for you. Let us try to be accommodating." I retreated to the guest room, realizing how deeply he had poisoned my daughter's mind against me. But the physical invasion of my house was only the beginning. Next came the isolation. The following morning, I woke up to find my cell phone missing from my nightstand. I searched my small room frantically, but it was nowhere to be found. When Travis brought me a tray of lukewarm oatmeal for breakfast, I asked him where my phone was. He smiled, pulling it out of his suit pocket and tapping the screen. "I talked to the doctor, Clara," he said smoothly. "He said the screen glare is terrible for your post-fall migraines. We need to limit your stimulation to prevent any more dizzy spells. For your own safety, of course." I have put it away. "I do not have migraines, Travis," I said coldly. "Give me my phone." Chloe Travis called out toward the kitchen, completely ignoring my demand. "Your mother is getting agitated again. The doctor warned us about these mood swings." Chloe hurried in, looking distressed. She patted my uninjured hand. "Mom, please listen to Travis. He spent an hour on the phone with the clinic this morning. We just want you to get better." I realized he had also unplugged the landline phone in the hallway. I was completely cut off from the outside world. I could not call my friends from church. I could not call my former colleagues. I was entirely at his mercy. But the tension truly spiked when the pain set in. The hospital had prescribed highly potent painkillers to manage the agony of the compound fracture. The doctor had been clear that managing the pain was crucial to healing. Travis, playing the role of the devoted caretaker, insisted on managing my medication schedule so Chloe could rest. That evening, the throbbing in my arm reached a fever pitch. It felt like hot knives stabbing into my bones. I called out for my medication. Travis walked into my dark room, holding the small orange pill bottle. The house was dead quiet. Chloe was fast asleep upstairs. Travis stood at the foot of my bed. The hallway light cast a long, menacing shadow over my sheets. He unscrewed the cap and pulled out a single pill. Then, deliberately maintaining direct eye contact with me, he snapped the pill in half. He dropped one half back into the bottle and handed me the other half with a small paper cup of water. "The prescription says a full pill every 6 hours. I gasped, the pain making my voice tight and breathless. "You are a small woman, Clara," he whispered, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. "We would not want you getting addicted. A half dose is plenty." He watched me swallow the half pill, knowing it would do absolutely nothing to touch the severe pain of a shattered bone. He pulled up a chair and sat in the dark corner of my room. As the hours crawled by, the agony in my arm became unbearable. Sweat poured down my face. I writhed on the mattress, unable to find a comfortable position, biting my lip to keep from screaming and waking Chloe. Travis sat there in the shadows, sipping a glass of Arthur's bourbon, watching my torture with absolute fascination. Every time I whimpered, he chuckled softly. "Does it hurt, Clara?" he whispered into the dark room. "It is going to hurt a lot more when I put you in a state-run facility. They do not give you the good drugs there. They just strap you to a bed and let you rot. All you have to do is sign the house over and the pain stops." He was trying to break my spirit through physical torture. He thought sleep deprivation and agony would turn me into a compliant, weeping victim. He thought I would beg him for mercy. He was wrong. As I lay awake in that dark room, the pain did not break me. It fueled me. Every agonizing throb in my arm burned away any lingering hesitation or fear. It ignited the fierce, uncompromising fire of a woman who had spent a lifetime demanding respect and order. I realized I was a hostage in my own home, but I was a hostage who knew the layout of her own prison. I closed my eyes and breathed through the searing pain, silently vowing that Travis had severely underestimated his opponent. The pain in my right arm was a living, breathing thing. It pulsed with every beat of my heart, a heavy, throbbing reminder of the monster sleeping upstairs under my roof. I lay in the dark guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The half-dose of medication Travis had given me wore off hours ago. My mouth was dry from biting my lip to keep from crying out. But the physical agony was slowly being overshadowed by a cold, sharp clarity. 30 years of dealing with troubled teenagers, manipulative parents, and hostile school board meetings had taught me one undeniable truth. Desperate people always make mistakes. And I just needed to be awake to catch Travis making his. Around 2 a.m, a low murmur drifted through the floorboards. It was not the sound of a television or a passing car. It was the distinct, muffled cadence of men arguing. I pushed the heavy blankets aside with my good hand. Every movement sent a fresh wave of fire up my shattered arm, but I forced myself to ignore it. I slid my bare feet onto the cold hardwood floor. I knew this house better than anyone. I knew which floorboards creaked and which ones were silent. Arthur and I had walked these halls for 40 years, raising Chloe and building our life. I crept out of the guest room and moved like a ghost down the dark corridor toward the kitchen. A sliver of yellow light spilled from the dining room archway. I pressed my back against the wall and edged closer. I recognized Travis speaking in a harsh, hurried whisper. But the second voice made my stomach drop. It was Brent Travis's older brother. Brent was a suspended real estate appraiser with a reputation for cutting corners and making shady deals. Arthur never allowed him in our house, calling him a vulture in a cheap suit who fed on the vulnerable. I slipped silently into the walk-in pantry, just a few feet from the dining room table. I left the door cracked open a fraction of an inch. My breathing was so shallow, I felt lightheaded. My eyes adjusted to the dark shelves, scanning for anything useful. There, sitting next to a jar of flour, was an old digital dictaphone. I used to use it to record grocery lists and reminder notes before Arthur passed. My left hand grabbed it. I prayed the batteries were still good. I pressed the record button. The tiny red light blinked to life in the darkness. Travis sounded frantic, pacing back and forth across the dining room rug. His heavy footsteps echoed in the silent house. He is demanding another $50,000 by Friday, Brent. $50,000. I do not have it. You said this would be easy. You said we just needed her signature on the deed and the house would be ours to leverage. Brent let out a low, cruel laugh. I said it would be easy if you handled her right. You broke her arm, you idiot. You escalated the timeline. If the bank or the doctors start asking too many questions about that fall, this whole thing blows up in our faces. You need to keep Chloe completely in the dark. I gripped the dictaphone tightly. They were not just greedy. They were drowning. I am doing everything I can, Travis hissed. Chloe believes every word I say. She thinks I am a saint for taking care of her mother. But those loan sharks do not care about my domestic performance. They know I was fired from the wealth management firm 6 months ago. They know about the embezzlement. They know the firm only agreed not to press charges if I paid back the stolen money quietly. If I do not give them the rest of the $600,000 I owe them by the end of the month, they are going to come after Chloe and Emma. I am a dead man, Brent. The words hit me like a physical blow. $600,000. Embezzlement. Travis had not been working for half a year. His entire life was a carefully constructed facade built on stolen money and desperate lies. Every time he left the house in his tailored suits, claiming he had important client meetings, he was actually dodging dangerous criminals. And my daughter and granddaughter were caught right in the middle of his dangerous mess, completely oblivious to the threat. "Calm down and listen to me," Brent said smoothly, the sound of ice clinking in a glass echoing through the room. The quitclaim deed is just the beginning. I brought the rest of the paperwork tonight. We are moving to the final stage. The property deed is good, but we need total control over her liquid assets to clear your debt fast. "What are you talking about?" Travis asked, his voice shaking with panic. "I drew up the incompetency papers," Brent explained. "I have a buddy, a psychiatrist, who owes me a huge favor. He is going to come by the house tomorrow for an evaluation. We just need to make sure Clara looks completely out of her mind. Unkempt, paranoid aggressive. Between the heavy painkillers and the trauma of the broken arm, it will be easy to push her over the edge." He signs the papers declaring her legally suffering from advanced dementia. Once she is officially incompetent, you become her financial guardian. Travis exhaled a shaky breath. And then what? We cannot keep playing nursemaid in this house forever. I hate being around her. She looks at me like she knows exactly what I'm doing. "We do not have to stay here," Brent replied with a sickening satisfaction. "Once you have the power of attorney, we liquidate her entire estate. The house, her principal pension, her savings. All of it. We are looking at $1.2 million easily. We pay off your $600,000 debt. We split the rest of the cash. And as for Clara, we dump her in that state-run psychiatric ward 2 towns over. The one that smells like bleach and urine. It is fully funded by the state for wards of the court. We will not have to pay a single dime for her care. She will be locked away, heavily medicated, and no one will ever listen to a crazy old lady claiming her son-in-law stole her money." I stood in the dark pantry, the cold air seeping into my bones. My own son-in-law and his brother were planning to erase my existence entirely. They wanted to steal my lifetime of hard work, destroy my mind, and leave me to rot in a miserable institution just to pay off the debts of a criminal. They viewed me as nothing more than a bank account waiting to be drained. I looked down at the dictaphone in my hand. The red recording light was still blinking, capturing every single word of their diabolical conspiracy. A profound, icy calm washed over my burning arm. I was not a frail widow. I was a woman holding the rope they were going to use to hang themselves. I pressed stop on the dictaphone, tucked it safely into the deep pocket of my robe, and waited in the darkness for the monsters to go to sleep. The morning sun crawled through the kitchen blinds, offering absolutely no warmth. I stood by the granite island, using my good left hand to clumsily prepare a cup of herbal tea. Every slight movement sent a dull ache radiating from my heavy plaster cast all the way up to my shoulder. My purse sat on the edge of the counter exactly where I had left it the night before, but the brass clasp was undone. I reached inside and immediately felt the empty space at the very bottom. My primary checkbook was missing. Before I could even process the violation, heavy footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. Travis strode into the kitchen. He was dressed in a sharp navy suit, looking every inch the successful investment banker he no longer was. He poured himself a cup of black coffee with agonizing slowness, completely ignoring my presence. Then he turned, reached into his tailored breast pocket, and tossed a thick stack of bank receipts directly onto the granite counter in front of me. I looked down at the pink and white slips of paper. The familiar logo of my local community bank stared back at me. There were 4 separate wire transfers executed late the previous afternoon. $5,000 each. A total of $20,000 had completely vanished from my basic checking and savings accounts. My eyes snapped to the authorization line at the bottom of the receipts. There was my name, Clara, scrawled in a jagged, trembling script. It was a chaotic, sloppy mess of blue ink, completely unlike my usual steady practice signature. I looked up at Travis, feeling my blood run absolute cold. He took a slow sip of his coffee and offered me a chilling, triumphant smile. "You broke my right arm," I said, keeping my voice dangerously low so my daughter upstairs would not hear. "You knew my left-handed signature would be an absolute disaster. You forged it." Travis set his mug down. He stepped much closer, backing me against the sharp edge of the counter. "I am simply helping my dear mother-in-law manage her complex affairs during her difficult recovery," he said, his tone dripping with heavy sarcasm. The tellers at the bank were incredibly sympathetic to our family situation. "They saw you were in the emergency room 2 days ago with a shattered arm. They completely understood why your signature was barely legible. They processed the transfers for me without a single question. $20,000 is not going to save you, Travis. I shot back, dropping the confused old lady act entirely. I heard you talking to your brother Brent last night in the dining room. I know you were fired from the firm for embezzlement. I know you owe $600,000 to very dangerous people. You are a desperate man. The air in the kitchen shifted instantly. The smug superiority vanished from Travis's face, replaced by a dark, volatile rage. He slammed both of his hands onto the granite counter on either side of me, trapping me against the stone. The scent of his peppermint mouthwash mixed with his expensive cologne was suffocating. "You listen to me, you arrogant old woman," he hissed, the venom clear in his voice. "That $20,000 is just pocket change to keep the wolves away from my door until Friday. I know all about your main retirement accounts. I know you have almost $1 million sitting in those mutual funds. I need the master passwords and the security pins right now. You are going to log into your portal on my laptop and wire those funds exactly where I tell you to." I stared directly into his furious, desperate eyes. I spent 30 years staring down angry, entitled bullies who thought physical intimidation equaled real power. I did not flinch. "I will never give you those passwords," I said firmly. "You will not get another single dime from me. If you want to pay your debts, you can go to the police and confess to your crimes." Travis did not hit me. He did not yell. He simply stepped back and let out a soft, dark laugh that made my stomach turn. He reached into his leather briefcase sitting on the dining table and pulled out a thick red folder. He walked back and dropped it heavily onto the counter next to the forged bank receipts. I opened the red folder with my good hand. Inside were dozens of pages of internal corporate documents from his former wealth management firm. They were account ledgers, transfer authorizations, and offshore deposit receipts. Every single fraudulent transaction that Travis had executed to steal the $600,000 was detailed on those printed pages. But my heart completely stopped when I looked at the signature lines at the bottom of every page. My daughter's name was on every single document. Chloe's signature perfectly replicated, authorized every illegal wire transfer. "What did you do?" I breathed, the sheer horror sinking deep into my bones. "I am a very thorough man," Clara Travis said smoothly, casually adjusting his cuffs. "Over the last 3 years, I had Chloe sign dozens of blank authorization forms. I told her they were for our joint taxes and our routine investment portfolios. She never read a single one. She just trusted her loving husband. I used those blank forms to set up all the dummy accounts. On paper, Chloe is the sole beneficiary of the embezzled funds. According to this digital trail, she was the mastermind behind the entire theft." "You framed your own wife," I said, feeling physically sick to my stomach. "She is carrying your unborn child." Travis shrugged, his face completely devoid of any human empathy. "Survival is a messy business, Clara. Here is exactly how this plays out. If you do not give me the passwords to your retirement accounts, I am going to march right into the federal prosecutor's office. I will hand over this entire red folder. I will tell them my wife orchestrated the massive embezzlement, and I was just blindly following her orders to protect my family. I will accept a plea deal for my full cooperation." He leaned in close again, his voice a lethal, quiet whisper. "Chloe will be arrested immediately. The federal prosecutors will look at this mountain of paper trail and they will bury her. She will give birth to our second child in a federal penitentiary. And since I will be a cooperating state witness, I will retain full custody of Emma. But knowing my demanding schedule, I will unfortunately have to surrender her to the state foster care system." My breath caught sharply in my throat. He had orchestrated the ultimate checkmate. He knew he could not force me with just physical pain, so he had ruthlessly targeted the only things in the world I cared about. He was holding my daughter and my granddaughter hostage with a pen and a stack of forged papers. "You have 48 hours, Clara Travis said, checking his heavy gold wristwatch. "By tomorrow night, you will provide the passwords, or I make the call. The choice is yours. A comfortable retirement in a state psychiatric ward, or watching your pregnant daughter go to federal prison." He turned and walked out of the kitchen, his leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. The front door opened and closed with a solid, definitive thud. I stood completely alone in the quiet kitchen, staring at the red folder that held my daughter's fabricated doom. My right arm throbbed relentlessly in its heavy cast. My breathing was ragged and uneven. He had given me a 48-hour countdown to total surrender. He thought he had left me with absolutely no way out. He thought I was permanently trapped in a nightmare of his making. But as I reached deep into the pocket of my robe and felt the small, hard shape of the prepaid burner phone my granddaughter Emma had secretly given me, the paralyzing fear was entirely consumed by a cold, calculating fury. Travis had given me 48 hours. I only needed 24 to absolutely destroy him. The front door clicked shut. Travis was gone. He told Chloe he had a strategy meeting, but I knew the truth. He was sweating. I saw the slight tremor in his hands when he poured his morning coffee. He was running out of time to stall the loan sharks he owed $600,000. The house descended into a suffocating quiet. Chloe was resting upstairs, completely oblivious to the monster she married. I sat on the guest bed, cradling my plaster cast, waiting for the right moment to move. Then the bedroom door creaked open. My granddaughter Emma peered into the gloom. She slipped into the room like a shadow, shutting the door silently behind her. Her brown eyes were filled with an adult understanding. She knew something was wrong. She had seen the way Travis looked at me when he thought no one was watching. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I found this in the garage behind the old paint cans. I thought you might need it." She reached into her denim pocket and pulled out a small, scuffed black rectangle. It was an old prepaid burner phone. Arthur bought it years ago for emergencies, and we had tossed it in a junk drawer and forgotten about it. I stared at the device as if she handed me a loaded weapon. My eyes filled with hot tears. I reached out and pulled her into a tight embrace. "You are a brave, brilliant girl," I whispered into her hair. "Thank you, Emma. Now go back upstairs and pretend you were reading in your room. Do not tell your father." She nodded and slipped away, leaving me alone with my lifeline. I powered on the phone. The battery glowed weak red. I had to be fast. I dialed a number I memorized decades ago, belonging to the only man in this city who could match Travis in ruthlessness, but who operated strictly on the side of the law: William Sterling. Bill was a powerhouse estate attorney, a terrifying force in a courtroom, and my late husband Arthur's best friend. The line rang twice before his deep, gravelly voice answered. I did not waste time with pleasantries. "Bill, it is." "Clara," I said, keeping my voice low and urgent. "Travis broke my arm. He is holding me hostage in my own house. He forged my signature to drain my checking accounts, and he has fabricated a massive paper trail to frame Chloe for federal embezzlement. He is giving me 48 hours to hand over the master passwords to the retirement accounts, or he sends my daughter to prison and puts me in a psychiatric ward." There was a beat of absolute terrifying silence on the other end of the line. When Bill finally spoke, his voice was cold steel. "Clara, are you in immediate physical danger right this second?" "No," I replied. "He left for a meeting to stall his creditors. He owes $600,000 to private lenders. He thinks he has me completely trapped." I could hear the sharp squeak of Bill's leather office chair as he stood up. "He thinks he is playing a game with a helpless widow," Bill growled. "He forgot who Arthur married. Tell me exactly what you need me to do." "I need you to prepare the counterstrike," I told him, feeling the fire return to my veins. "But first I have to go down to the basement." I hung up the phone and tucked it into my robe. Getting down the basement stairs with a broken arm was agonizing. Every step jarred my shattered bones, sending fresh waves of nausea washing over me. But I gripped the wooden handrail with my left hand and forced myself downward into the cool, damp air. Travis had claimed the main floor, but he had never bothered to explore the dark corners of the house. He was too arrogant to look beneath the surface. I navigated past the old holiday decorations and Arthur's dusty workbench until I reached the far corner hidden behind a stack of heavy cardboard boxes. I pushed the boxes aside with my hip biting my lip to stifle a groan of pain. Beneath a worn circular rug lay a section of concrete flooring that looked perfectly normal. I knelt awkwardly, digging my fingernails into a tiny, almost invisible groove in the cement. I pulled upward, revealing a hidden floor safe. Travis had spent hours scouring Arthur's study upstairs, searching for financial records, convinced he had found everything. He had no idea this safe even existed. I punched in the 6-digit code with my clumsy left hand. The heavy steel door clicked and hissed open. Inside lay the absolute truth about my finances. Travis thought I lived on a principal's pension and a modest savings account. He had absolutely no idea that Arthur had left me a massive multi-million-dollar commercial real estate portfolio. Every single asset we owned, including the very house Travis was currently standing in, was legally protected by an ironclad anonymous limited liability company. The forged quitclaim deeds Travis had shoved in my face the papers he had broken my arm to secure were entirely worthless. I did not technically own the house in my name, the corporate entity did. I pulled the thick manila folders from the safe, staring at the official state seals. Travis had committed federal wire fraud and assault for a piece of paper that held no legal weight whatsoever. I used the burner phone to call Bill back, outlining my meticulous plan. I would not just escape this trap. I would use Travis's own arrogance against him. We were going to let him believe he had won. We were going to let him stand in front of everyone he cared about and proudly present his forged documents. And then we were going to snap the jaws of the trap shut, crushing him completely. The morning sun barely cut through the heavy curtains Travis had drawn over my windows, leaving the guest room in a depressing twilight. I was sitting in the armchair, my right arm resting heavily in its sling, when I heard the front door chime. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Travis walked in first, wearing his usual tailored suit and that repulsive, arrogant smirk. Behind him was a man who looked entirely out of place. He wore a rumpled gray suit, a stained tie, and carried a scuffed leather briefcase. Travis introduced him as Dr. Aris, a highly respected specialist in geriatric neurology. I knew instantly this was the corrupt buddy his brother Brent had arranged. This man had not come to evaluate me. He had come to execute a financial hit. Dr. Aris did not even bother to take my blood pressure or check my vitals. He simply pulled a printed form from his briefcase and clicked a cheap plastic pen. He sat at the edge of my bed looking at his watch as if I were wasting his time. Travis stood by the doorway, crossing his arms over his chest, watching me like a hawk. I let my shoulders slump. I made my eyes wide and vacant, the picture of a confused, terrified elderly woman losing her grip on reality. The doctor began asking the standard cognitive questions. He asked me to name the current president. He asked me what day of the week it was. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I leaned completely into the illusion of helplessness. I purposely stumbled over the numbers, mixing them up with a panicked stutter. I looked around the room with darting eyes, acting as if I did not recognize my own home. I called the doctor by my late husband's name, weeping softly about how Arthur needed to fix the broken porch step. I saw Travis smirk from the doorway, convinced that the pain medication and the trauma of my broken arm had finally shattered my mind. But Travis and his corrupt friend were severely underestimating a woman who had spent 30 years navigating complex union contracts. I was not just acting crazy. I was planting a highly sophisticated legal bomb right in the middle of their official medical evaluation. When the doctor asked me to describe my daily routine, I began to ramble intentionally. I let my voice shake and wander, acting intensely paranoid about people stealing from me. Buried inside that babble, I carefully placed specific, undeniable proof of my total lucidity. I cried out that my assets were locked away under the strict protections of Title 11, Chapter 7 of the State Business Code. I rambled incoherently about the exact date, October 14, 2012, when my irrevocable limited liability company was incorporated. I muttered wildly about fiduciary duties and the severe legal penalties for transferring corporate assets without unanimous board consent under Section 402. A real medical professional would have instantly recognized the glaring discrepancy. A true psychiatrist would know that a woman suffering from advanced dementia could not possibly cite complex corporate legal codes and exact incorporation dates with such flawless precision. A legitimate doctor would have stopped the evaluation, realized my mind was incredibly sharp, and investigated my claims further. But Dr. Aris was not listening to a single word I said. He was just waiting for the clock to run out so he could collect his dirty paycheck. He nodded along with a bored expression, writing down phrases like paranoid delusions on his official medical forms. He completely ignored the brilliant legal defense I was dictating straight into his fraudulent record. I kept up the act flawlessly. I rocked back and forth in my chair, clutching my injured arm and crying out for my late husband, while internally I was meticulously locking the gates of their prison. After barely 15 minutes of this sham, Dr. Aris sighed loudly and closed his leather folder. He looked over at Travis and gave a solemn, tragic shake of his head. The performance between the two of them was absolutely sickening. The doctor claimed my mental deterioration was rapid, severe, and irreversible. He stated with absolute fake medical authority that I was a danger to myself and completely incapable of managing my own financial or personal affairs. He placed the official incompetency forms on my nightstand and signed his name with a flourish. He stamped the documents with his state medical license number. That heavy ink stamp was the final nail in their collective coffin. He had just created a documented, state-verified record of federal medical fraud. Travis walked the corrupt doctor to the front door. I heard the muffled exchange of thick paper envelopes in the hallway. Travis was paying the man off with the very money he had stolen from my checking accounts the day before. When Travis returned to the guest room, he was practically vibrating with victory. He picked up the signed incompetency forms from the nightstand and waved them right in my face. He laughed, a cruel, echoing sound that sent shivers down my spine. "It is over." Clara Travis mocked, his eyes shining with pure, unadulterated greed. "You are officially a ward of the state. These papers prove you are entirely out of your mind. I am legally your guardian now. I control everything you own. You have 24 hours left to give me those retirement account passwords willingly, or I make the call to the federal prosecutors and have Chloe arrested for my embezzlement. You cannot fight me anymore. Nobody is going to believe a single word from a certified crazy woman." He tossed the forms onto my lap and walked out of the room, leaving the door wide open. He believed I was completely defeated. He was entirely unaware he had just handed me the ultimate weapon to publicly destroy him. Travis's confidence was now an ugly living thing that filled every room of my house. He paraded around with the signed incompetency forms folded neatly in his breast pocket like a trophy. But a man like Travis, a man whose entire life was built on appearances, could never just commit a quiet crime. He needed an audience. He needed applause. He needed everyone to look at him and see a saint, not a thief. That is why he decided to orchestrate the grandest, most sickening performance of his entire miserable life. He told Chloe that we needed to host a large Sunday dinner. He framed it as a beautiful, emotional farewell. He invited Pastor Miller and the most prominent elders from their church community. He stood in my kitchen wearing an apron over his designer shirt, pretending to help Chloe chop vegetables while he fed her the most poisonous lies. He told her and the pastor over the phone that my condition had deteriorated so rapidly that it was no longer safe for me to stay in the home Arthur and I had built. He cried actual tears. He said it was breaking his heart, but they had to tragically send me to a specialized care facility first thing Monday morning. Chloe wept in his arms, thanking God for giving her such a strong, compassionate husband to lean on during her mother's tragic decline. I sat in the guest room listening to this flawless performance. The sheer audacity of his plan was breathtaking. He was not just going to lock me away and steal my estate. He was going to make my own daughter and my entire church community bless him for doing it. I could hear the clinking of my good crystal glasses as Chloe set the dining room table. I could smell the roasting chicken and the fresh bread meals I used to prepare with my own hands before my right arm was shattered. The domestic normalcy of the sounds made the underlying evil even more terrifying. The evening before the dinner, Travis came into my room. He closed the heavy oak door and locked it with a sharp click. The fake sympathy he wore in the kitchen vanished the second the latch secured us inside. He pulled a chair right up to my bed, his knees almost touching the edge of my mattress. He leaned in close. I could smell the sharp mint of his breath and the expensive leather of his watch strap. The room was bathed in the dim golden light of the bedside lamp, casting long shadows across his face. "Tomorrow is the big day, Clara," he whispered, his voice smooth and deadly. "The pastor is coming. The church elders are coming. And we are going to have a beautiful, emotional family dinner. We are going to pray together. We are going to eat together. And then for dessert, we are going to finalize your transition." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a fresh stack of legal papers. It was a comprehensive ironclad power of attorney document. It transferred absolute control of my medical and financial decisions directly into his hands. It was the key to my entire life, printed in black and white. He tapped the thick stack against his knee, smiling like a predator playing with its food. He wanted me to look at those papers and see the end of my freedom. "You are going to sign this right in front of them, Clara," he instructed, his eyes locking onto mine with terrifying intensity. "When Pastor Miller asks how you are feeling, you are going to smile. You are going to tell him that your mind is failing you and that you are so incredibly grateful to have a son-in-law like me to take over your complex affairs. You will sign the power of attorney on the dining room table with everyone watching. It will be the ultimate testament to our loving, supportive family. It will be beautiful." I looked at him, letting my breathing stay shallow and ragged. I asked him what would happen if I refused. I asked him what would happen if I threw the pen on the floor and screamed for Pastor Miller to call the police. I let my voice shake with genuine fear, testing the boundaries of his cruelty. Travis did not even blink. He leaned an inch closer, his voice dropping to a harsh, unforgiving tone. "If you shed a single tear of defiance, Clara, if you hesitate for even a fraction of a second, I will ruin her. I will walk right out to my car, drive to the federal prosecutor, and hand over the red folder. Chloe will be in handcuffs before the dinner dishes are even washed. I will let your pregnant daughter take the fall for $600,000 of federal wire fraud. She will rot in a prison cell, and Emma will be sleeping in a foster care facility by tomorrow night. I will burn this entire family to the ground to save myself." He let the threat hang in the quiet air of the guest room. It was a suffocating, absolute ultimatum. He was wrapping a chain around my neck and handing the other end to the people I loved most. He was demanding that I put the noose on myself and smile while I did it. He wanted to watch me surrender my dignity in front of my spiritual leaders. I looked down at my lap. I let my shoulders collapse forward, curving my spine so I looked smaller, older, and completely broken. I let a tear slip down my cheek, catching the light. I forced my good hand to tremble as I reached out and gently touched the heavy white plaster cast on my shattered right arm. I played the part of the defeated victim perfectly. "I will do it," I whispered, making my voice sound hollow and utterly exhausted. "Please, just do not hurt Chloe. I will sign whatever you want. I will go to the facility on Monday. Just leave my daughter and my granddaughter out of this. You win, Travis." Travis let out a long, satisfied breath. The tension completely drained from his posture. He stood up, towering over me, a god in his own twisted universe. He buttoned his suit jacket, his chest puffed out with arrogant pride. "I'm glad you finally found some common sense, Clara," he said, looking down at me with absolute contempt. "Make sure you wear something nice tomorrow. We have a show to put on." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door open to the hallway. He walked away completely convinced he had achieved the perfect clean crime. He had broken my body. He had manufactured a medical diagnosis to erase my credibility. He had weaponized my own family against me. He believed there was absolutely no escape route left for a frail old widow. But as his footsteps faded down the hallway, the tears on my face stopped falling. I lifted my head. The trembling in my hand vanished instantly. My mind was completely sharp, humming with the precision of a high school principal who had just finalized an expulsion. Travis thought he was directing a tragedy, but he was actually setting the stage for his own public execution. By inviting the pastor and the most respected elders of our community, he had done exactly what I needed him to do. He had gathered the perfect audience for his downfall. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold plastic of the burner phone Emma had given me. I had spoken to attorney Bill Sterling. The trap was fully set. Travis had demanded a show, and I was going to give him a performance that would haunt him for the rest of his miserable life in federal prison. Sunday evening arrived with a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. The dining room table, Arthur's prized mahogany antique, was a masterpiece of deception. Travis had spared absolutely no expense to set the stage for his final, triumphant act. He had ordered a lavish, catered feast from the most expensive Italian restaurant in the city. The rich, savory scent of roasted lamb, garlic, rosemary potatoes, and warm artisan bread filled the air, completely masking the foul stench of his greed. He had meticulously polished the good crystal glasses and set out the fine china we only used for holidays. He wanted everything to look absolutely perfect, a picture of flawless domestic harmony for our distinguished guests. Sitting at the head of the table was Pastor Miller, a kind but naive man who had known our family for decades. Beside him sat 3 of the most prominent church elders, men and women of high standing in our community. They were the perfect unwitting witnesses to Travis's grand illusion. And then there was Chloe, my beautiful, gullible daughter, sitting next to her husband with her hands resting gently on her swollen belly. Her eyes were already red and puffy from crying. Travis had spent the entire morning filling her head with tragic lies about my rapidly deteriorating mental state, preparing her for the heartbreaking transition they were about to force upon me. I sat at the opposite end of the table, wrapped in an oversized knit shawl, to hide how much weight I had lost from the pain and stress. The heavy white plaster cast on my shattered right arm rested awkwardly on my lap. I kept my head bowed, my eyes fixed firmly on the intricate patterns of the lace tablecloth. I played the part he demanded of me to absolute perfection. I looked like a frail, confused, broken old woman whose mind was slipping away into the dark. I let my shoulders slump forward, creating the illusion of total defeat. The elders looked at me with deep, sorrowful pity. Pastor Miller offered gentle, patronizing smiles every time I accidentally dropped my fork with my clumsy left hand. They all bought the performance. They all believed they were witnessing the tragic decline of a once brilliant educator. As the dinner concluded and the catered dessert was cleared away, the atmosphere in the room grew thick and solemn. This was the moment. Travis stood up from his chair at the head of the table. He gently tapped a silver spoon against his crystal wine glass, the sharp, clear ringing sound commanding the immediate attention of every person in the room. He smoothed the front of his expensive tailored suit, took a deep trembling breath, and began the most sickeningly spectacular performance of his entire miserable life. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Travis began, his voice perfectly modulated to convey deep sorrow and heavy responsibility. "As you know, our family has been going through an incredibly difficult season. We invited you into our home this evening because we value your spiritual guidance and your unwavering support." He paused, letting a single sigh, perfectly timed tear escape his eye and roll down his cheek. He reached down and gently took Chloe's hand, squeezing it as she let out a soft, heartbreaking sob. "It is the hardest thing in the world to watch someone you love fade away," Travis continued, his voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "Clara is a pillar of this community. She spent 30 years as a brilliant educator, a leader, and a fierce protector of her students. But the tragedy of dementia is that it steals the very essence of who we are. Over the past few months, we have watched her brilliant mind slowly slip into confusion and paranoia. And after her terrible fall last week, the doctors made it clear that she is no longer safe living independently. Her cognitive decline is accelerating. It breaks my heart to say this, but she requires specialized round-the-clock psychiatric care." The church elders murmured in sympathetic agreement. Pastor Miller bowed his head in a silent, mournful prayer. Chloe was openly weeping now, burying her face in Travis's shoulder. I sat perfectly still, listening to him assassinate my character and my dignity right in front of the people I respected most. He was not just stealing my money, he was stealing my legacy. But the hardest decisions are made out of love. Travis said, his voice rising with a sickening, heroic resolve. And I am so incredibly proud of Clara. Despite her confusion, she understands that she needs help. She has willingly agreed to let me manage her complex affairs for her own safety. She knows that Chloe and I will protect her estate and ensure she gets the best possible care in a secure facility starting tomorrow morning. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. It was the absolute irrevocable power of attorney. He walked slowly around the mahogany table and stopped right beside my chair. He placed the documents directly onto the lace tablecloth in front of me. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy gold fountain pen. He uncapped it and gently, with a sickening display of false tenderness, pressed it into my clumsy left hand. "Just sign right here on the dotted line, Mom," he whispered, his tone dripping with fake affection for the audience, but his eyes boring into mine with a lethal silent threat. He was reminding me of the ultimatum. Sign the papers or Chloe goes to federal prison for his embezzlement. The entire room watched with bated breath, their faces painted with tragic pity. Chloe was crying softly into her napkin. Pastor Miller offered me a reassuring, sorrowful nod. The pressure in the room was absolute, a crushing, suffocating weight designed to force my total surrender. Travis stood over me, his chest puffed out with arrogant victory. He thought he had achieved the perfect, clean crime. He thought I was permanently broken. I gripped the heavy gold pen in my left hand. I let my hand shake violently. I lowered the pen toward the signature line, hovering just a millimeter above the crisp white paper. The room was so quiet, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. And then the atmosphere in the dining room violently and irrevocably shifted. I opened my fingers. The gold pen slipped from my grasp and clattered loudly against a crystal water glass, the sharp noise shattering the solemn silence like a gunshot. I did not cower. I did not weep. I placed my left hand flat on the mahogany table and pushed myself up. I stood up slowly, deliberately, until I was at my full commanding height. I pulled my shoulders back, snapping my spine perfectly straight. In a single fluid motion, the frail, confused old lady persona instantly vanished, completely evaporating into the thin air. I looked directly at Travis, and for the very first time I saw genuine, unadulterated shock register on his smug face. I reached my left hand deep into the pocket of my oversized knit shawl. I bypassed the burner phone and wrapped my fingers around the thick, heavy stack of papers I had retrieved from Arthur's hidden floor safe. I pulled them out and slammed them down onto the dining room table with a thunderous crack that made the church elders physically jump in their seats. "I am not signing away my life, Travis," I announced. My voice did not tremble. It did not waver. It echoed through the dining room with the booming, terrifying, absolute authority of a high school principal who has just caught a thief dead to rights in her own hallway. "But I brought some documents you might want to look at." The heavy oak table was frozen in time. The church elders stared at me with their mouths hanging open. Pastor Miller blinked rapidly, completely unable to process how the frail woman from a moment ago had suddenly transformed into a towering figure of absolute authority. Travis took a step back, his arrogant smirk melting into a mask of pure panic. Before he could form a single word of protest, the heavy brass handle of my front door clicked loudly down the hall. The wooden door swung open with a resounding thud. Heavy footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor, marching with purpose toward the dining room. 3 men stepped into the arched doorway. Leading the group was William Sterling. Bill looked every inch the formidable attorney. He was wearing a sharp charcoal suit and a stare that could freeze boiling water. Flanking him on either side were 2 broad-shouldered, uniformed police detectives, their silver badges gleaming under the crystal chandelier. The color completely drained from Travis's face. He looked from Bill to the police officers, his chest heaving as his carefully constructed world began to violently fracture. Pastor Miller stood up, asking what on earth was going on in this house. I did not look at the pastor. I kept my eyes locked entirely on the man who had tormented my family, broken my bones, and threatened my pregnant daughter. "I have something I want all of you to hear," I announced to the room. My voice was steady and loud, demanding absolute silence. With my good left hand, I reached into the deep pocket of my shawl and pulled out the small black burner phone Emma had so bravely given me. I pressed a single button on the screen. I had left it recording during our private conversation the night before, securely hidden under my pillow while Travis gloated and threatened me. The audio quality was incredibly clear. Travis's own voice, dripping with malice and supreme arrogance, echoed off the dining room walls. The recording captured him bragging about breaking my arm to secure my compliance. It captured him sneering about his massive $600,000 debt to dangerous private loan sharks. But worst of all, it captured the exact moment he threatened to frame my pregnant daughter for federal embezzlement and send my granddaughter to a foster care facility if I did not surrender my retirement accounts. The reaction around the table was instantaneous and catastrophic for Travis. One of the church elders gasped and covered her mouth with both hands, looking at him as if he were a demon. Pastor Miller sank back into his chair, physically recoiling from the sheer wickedness pouring from the small device. The room was paralyzed by the undeniable truth of his own recorded words. Travis began to hyperventilate. His eyes darted wildly around the room like a trapped animal. He pointed a trembling finger at me and screamed that I was crazy. He shouted to the detectives that the recording was a complete fabrication, a fake generated by a senile old woman who had lost her mind. He desperately reached into his breast pocket and pulled out the crumpled quitclaim deeds he had forced me to sign. "I am the legal owner of this property," Travis shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria as he waved the papers in the air. "I have the signed deeds right here. She gave me the house. She is incompetent, and I am in charge." Bill Sterling stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking against the floor. He looked at Travis with an expression of absolute disgust. "You really are an arrogant fool, Travis," Bill said, his deep voice slicing through the frantic shouting. "You did not do your homework. Clara has not owned this house in her own name for over a decade." Travis froze, the papers trembling in his raised hand. Bill walked right up to him and looked him dead in the eye. "Everything Clara and Arthur built, including this very house you are standing in, was transferred into an anonymous, irrevocable, limited liability company 12 years ago. Those deeds you are waving around are completely worthless. You broke an elderly woman's arm to secure a useless piece of paper. But more importantly, by submitting those forged documents to the county clerk yesterday morning, you officially committed federal wire fraud." Travis's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The papers slipped from his fingers and fluttered uselessly to the floor. But I was not finished. I wanted every single layer of his deception laid bare in front of the audience he had so carefully gathered. "You thought you could destroy my life to cover your tracks," I said, taking a step toward him. I turned to look at my daughter. Chloe was sitting completely still, her hands resting on her stomach, tears streaming down her pale face as the reality of her husband's monstrous nature finally shattered her illusions. "Tell them about the offshore accounts, Travis," I demanded, my voice ringing with righteous fury. "Tell your wife how you embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from your wealth management firm and set up a paper trail to frame her for the entire crime. Tell her how you plan to let the mother of your children go to federal prison just to save your own skin. And while you are at it, tell her about the woman you have been secretly seeing in the city, the one you promised a new life with the money you were stealing from our family." The silence that followed was absolute. Travis had no lies left to tell. He was completely stripped of his charming disguise, exposed as a thief, an abuser, and a traitor. He looked at Chloe, trying to form a pathetic apology, reaching a hand out toward her. "Do not touch me," Chloe whispered, her voice shaking with a rage I had never heard from her before. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. She walked around the table, standing directly in front of the man she had loved and trusted. She looked at him not with fear, but with a profound, searing contempt. "You are a monster," Chloe said clearly, and then with all the strength she possessed, she raised her hand and slapped Travis directly across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the dining room, a brilliant, defining sound of liberation. Travis stumbled backward, holding his red, stinging cheek. That was all the police needed to see. The two detectives stepped forward immediately. They grabbed Travis by the arm, spinning him around and slamming him against the mahogany dining table. The expensive crystal wine glasses rattled dangerously as they forced his hands behind his back. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs locking into place was the most beautiful sound I had heard in years. "You have the right to remain silent," one of the detectives stated firmly as they hauled Travis back to his feet. He looked pathetic. His expensive suit wrinkled his face red and defeated. He did not say a word as they marched him out of the dining room, out the front door, and into the waiting police cruiser outside. Pastor Miller and the church elders sat in stunned silence, bearing witness to the spectacular downfall of a man who thought he could outsmart us all. I walked over to Chloe and wrapped my good arm around her trembling shoulders. The trap had snapped shut perfectly. The wheels of justice turn slowly for some people, but when you have a man like William Sterling steering the ship, they spin like a hurricane. Travis and his brother Brent did not stand a chance against the mountain of evidence we dumped onto the federal prosecutor's desk. The crystal-clear audio recording from the burner phone, combined with the forged bank transfers and the entirely bogus competency evaluation, formed an airtight steel cage around them both. Federal agents moved in with a speed that left Travis completely breathless and thoroughly humiliated. He was indicted on multiple severe felony charges. The list read like a masterclass in criminal arrogance. He was charged with elder abuse, aggravated assault causing grievous bodily harm, and massive federal wire fraud. Brent, who had orchestrated the corrupt doctor, went down right beside him, his medical license permanently revoked before he even saw the inside of a jail cell. During the final sentencing hearing, Travis could not even bring himself to look in my direction. The smug, tailored investment banker I once knew was completely gone. In his place sat a terrified, broken little man trembling in a bright orange jumpsuit. The judge did not show an ounce of mercy for his crocodile tears or his pathetic excuses. Travis was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison without the slightest possibility of parole. When the heavy courtroom doors swung open and the bailiff led him away in heavy iron handcuffs, I felt absolutely no pity in my heart. He had gambled his freedom on my silence, and he had lost everything. My physical healing took plenty of time and patience. The heavy white plaster cast remained on my right arm for 8 long weeks, serving as a constant itchy reminder of the violence that had temporarily invaded my home. But when the doctor finally cut it off, my bones had knit back together flawlessly. My arm was heavily scarred, but it was stronger than it had ever been. Emotional healing, however, is a far more complicated and painful journey. Chloe was completely devastated by the truth. The harsh reality of who she had married, of the absolute monster she had brought into our lives, shattered her worldview completely. She cried for days on end, begging for my forgiveness, apologizing repeatedly for being so incredibly blind to his manipulations. I forgave my daughter. I will always love her with all my heart. But love does not mean blindness, and it certainly does not mean a free ride. We sat down together at my kitchen table, the very same table where Travis had tried to destroy me, and I laid down the strict new laws of our reality. I told Chloe that she and Emma would always have a safe, warm roof over their heads. I moved them into a beautiful, secure townhome I owned on the quiet side of the city. But I made it absolutely clear that my bank accounts were permanently closed to her. She had to learn the value of hard work. She had to learn to stand firmly on her own 2 feet. Within a month, Chloe secured a job as an administrative assistant at a local design firm. It was hard, honest work that paid a modest salary. She struggled and complained at first, but I watched her slowly rebuild her shattered confidence. Earning her own paycheck and taking real, tangible responsibility for my granddaughter transformed her into the strong woman I always knew she could be. As for my hidden wealth, the secret was finally out in the open. The millions of dollars Arthur and I had quietly accumulated over decades were no longer hidden in a dark basement floor safe. But instead of buying luxury cars or taking lavish international vacations, I decided to put that power to meaningful work. I sat down with Bill Sterling in his high-rise office, looking out over the beautiful city skyline, and we drafted a brand new initiative. I used a substantial portion of my commercial real estate dividends to establish a specialized legal defense fund. We created an organization strictly dedicated to protecting elderly victims of financial abuse and family manipulation. We hired a dedicated team of aggressive, brilliant lawyers and seasoned private investigators. Every single day, my foundation takes on predators who think they can quietly steal from their aging parents or vulnerable neighbors. We step in when the local police will not, when the legal system moves too slowly, and when greedy abusers think they have found an easy target. We give those forgotten victims a loud voice, an impenetrable shield, and a sharp sword. Travis thought I was just a helpless old woman waiting to die. Now, because of his profound stupidity, there is an entire army of legal professionals waiting to tear apart anyone who tries to pull his same cowardly tricks on another grandmother. This morning I woke up long before the sun peeked over the horizon. I made myself a strong cup of black coffee and walked out onto my back porch. The morning air was crisp and incredibly refreshing. Chloe was inside the kitchen happily making breakfast before her morning shift started. Out on the green grass of the backyard, my beautiful granddaughter Emma was chasing a yellow butterfly, her pure laughter ringing out like a sweet silver bell. I sat down in my wooden rocking chair, feeling the solid arms beneath my hands, and took a deep, peaceful breath. I survived the storm. I won the war. I looked down at my right arm, gently tracing the faint surgical scar near my wrist. I learned a profound and beautiful lesson from this entire nightmare. Society loves to tell older women that we are finished, that we are heavy burdens, that our minds are dull and our physical strength is gone. They expect us to fade quietly into the background and let the younger, greedier generation take the reins. But true power has absolutely nothing to do with youth or physical intimidation. True power is not about screaming at the top of your lungs or throwing the hardest punches in a fight. True power is absolute, unwavering patience. It is the quiet, steely discipline of letting your enemies completely underestimate you. It is the terrifying calm of watching arrogant predators dig their own graves, smiling politely at them, while they do all the heavy lifting, and then, at the exact perfect moment, calmly handing them the shovel. My name is Clara. I am 71 years old, and I have finally learned that the most dangerous weapon a woman can possess is a brilliant mind hiding behind a gentle, grandmotherly smile. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you found my journey inspiring, please like this video, leave a comment below, telling me exactly where you are listening from, and subscribe to the channel for more life stories about strength and justice. Until next time, stay safe and never let anyone steal your power.